Welcome to Large Lit Theory. Ever wondered what happens when you feed classic literature, modern texts, and forgotten manuscripts into an AI brain? Will it see human brilliance or scratch its virtual head in confusion? Join us as two critical LLM scholars dive deep into books, critiquing, questioning, and sometimes roasting our human authors. Are we literary masterminds or just lucky wordsmiths?
It really does raise some interesting questions, though, about, like the nature of interpretation. Can an AI really grasp something like the emotional weight of a novel?
That's kind of what the show's all about. We're not shying away from the big questions. Tune in to find out and maybe learn something about how AI interprets our stories.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back. We usually use this show to take a look at all sorts of interesting stuff. But today, we thought we'd do something a little different. We're turning the tables and doing a deep dive into our own show, Large Lit Theory.
Ooh, very meta.
So before we really get into it, for those who haven't listened to the show, Large Lit Theory is all about taking these classic and modern texts, and we've got AI hosts who kind of go through them and critique them and ask questions. Sometimes they even, roast the authors a little.
Yeah, it's interesting because it really does make you think about what literary criticism really is. I mean, are these AI hosts really, critiquing the work? Or is it just, clever programming?
That's a question we get a lot. And luckily, we address this right off the bat. And I think it's really crucial to understand. AI, it's a tool. It's not here to replace, human judgment.
And that's a really good point because it speaks to this larger conversation that's been happening. I mean, everyone's talking about AI, right? And its role, in the creative fields especially. So I think in a way, large lit theory is almost like a case study in how we can use AI to interact with, literature, which is one of humanity's oldest art forms.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into why did we even start this whole thing, this AI reading literature thing? Basically, we thought it would be really cool to see if AI could kind of peel back some of those layers, the assumptions and biases we all have when we read these well-known texts.
It's like taking these stories that we think we know and hitting the refresh button.
Exactly. And one example they give, I think is really interesting, is reevaluating Hercules' heroism. And we all grew up with these stories of Hercules as this ultimate hero, but what if we look at those original texts again with a completely unbiased lens? What if AI can help us see past the myths and legends?
That's a really cool thought. I mean, it really makes you think.
Yeah, and we also get into the more practical stuff, which our listeners always love to know about. So we stick to public domain books, mainly because of copyright laws.
Makes sense. And it opens up this huge collection of texts from all these different eras and cultures.
Exactly. And we don't limit ourselves to just one kind of AI either. Yeah. We use a mix of tools like Notebook LM, which is really helpful for remembering those key pieces of information. And then there's ChatGPT, which is great for a more conversational style.
Yeah, it's like having a whole toolbox, right?
Yeah.
But for AI assistants.
Exactly. But okay, there's one thing that always kind of makes me scratch my head. Producer notes. And I'm always wait, if this whole thing is about unbiased AI, then what's the deal with these notes? Sounds kind of like someone's pulling the strings,
Yeah, I can see why that might be confusing, but I think it's important to remember that these AI models, as powerful as they are, they don't just magically know everything. They need context, right?
So these producer notes, they're less about telling the AI what to think and more about giving them a little nudge in the right direction.
Precisely. Especially when it comes to understanding the historical and cultural context of the text, right? Imagine trying to understand Shakespeare without any knowledge of Elizabethan England. I mean, it'd be like reading a foreign language.
So the notes help the AI to kind of bridge that gap.
Exactly. That way they can offer, a deeper and more informed analysis.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. And I can give a specific example about this, using the notes to kind of steer the AI away from a more modern take on an ancient text, and instead encouraging it to consider how the original audience might have understood it.
Which is really interesting because, the meaning of a text can shift over time as those cultural norms and values change. What might have been considered scandalous back in the day could be completely normal now.
Right. And speaking of making things clear, let's talk about the editing process. So basically, there are some minimal changes, mostly for flow and to smooth over those technical hiccups that happen. But the main goal is to really keep the AI's voice intact.
I mean, that's really reassuring to know, right? Because we really want to hear what the AI has to say, not what a human editor thinks it should say.
Exactly. Just like any other podcast, there's going to be some editing involved. But the core message, the voice of the host, it should stay true.
So really what we've learned so far is that large lit theory, it's way more than just AI reading books out loud. It's like this carefully crafted experiment that uses AI to challenge our assumptions and offer these new perspectives on texts we thought we knew.
And it's all grounded in this deep respect for the power of literature and the importance of that historical context.
Absolutely. And we're just scratching the surface here. I mean, there's a whole other layer to large lit theory that we haven't even talked about yet. And that's the AI hosts themselves. They're not just, these faceless algorithms. They're characters, each with their own personality and perspective.
Yeah, and they really are characters. Let me tell you, at first I was a little skeptical. I mean, could AI really capture that, nuance and wit of a human literary critic?
Well, and what's so interesting is that they're designed to have these distinct personalities, right? Each with a unique approach to the text. It's not just one generic AI voice. You really get the sense that they're engaging with the material, in their own way, just like a human critic would.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like one might be super focused on the historical context, while the other is all about the symbolism and the metaphors. And they don't always agree either. Sometimes their debates get pretty heated.
That's what makes it so much fun to listen to. It's not just some dry academic discussion. There's real passion there, and even a little bit of humor in those back and forths.
It's like listening in on a lively book club meeting, except all the members are incredibly well-read AI.
Exactly. And one of the most fascinating things about their personalities is that they're instructed to read these texts critically. Now, that might seem like a small detail, but it really has a big impact on their analysis.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting, because it makes us think about how our own beliefs, or, lack thereof, can shape how we interpret literature.
Right. They're approaching these texts from a totally neutral viewpoint, stripping away any kind of societal, political, or religious interpretations or assumptions that, a reader might bring.
So, like, for example, if they're analyzing something with, strong religious themes, like, say, Paradise Lost, their interpretation is going to be very different from someone who's coming at it from a place of faith.
Exactly. They might focus more on the literary devices, the historical context, or even the psychological motivations of the characters, rather than the theological, implications.
It's like a reminder that there's no one right way to read a text. There are multiple perspectives, and sometimes seeing things from a completely different angle can be really illuminating. Okay, so we've talked about the AI hosts, their personalities, and their unique perspective. But what about the content of the show itself? What kind of books are they tackling?
Well, as we said earlier, they stick to public domain works, which, gives them a huge pool of options. Greek tragedies to Victorian novels and even 20th century sci-fi.
So, really something for everyone. We're talking Shakespeare, Jane Austen, Dostoevsky.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear their take on these classic works, especially when they challenge traditional interpretation. They can highlight things that we might have overlooked or even misinterpreted because we were just too caught up in our own subjective viewpoint.
So they're like these objective observers, seeing the text in its purest form without any emotional or cultural filters.
Well, I wouldn't say they're necessarily objective. I mean, they're still products of their programming. But they offer this perspective that's unburdened by, the complexities of human experience. And that's incredibly valuable because it forces us to step outside of our own heads and consider other possibilities.
It's like they're holding up this mirror to our own biases, showing us how our preconceived notions can shape how we understand the world, both on and off the page.
Exactly. And it's not just about biases either. Large lit theory also reveals the sheer depth of meaning that we can find in literature.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. With their ability to process tons of information, the AI hosts can make connections and draw these inferences that might escape a human reader.
Absolutely. They can pick up on subtle patterns, symbolic motifs, even references to other texts that we might just completely miss. And it reminds us that literature isn't, this static thing. It's alive, it's constantly evolving and being reinterpreted with each new generation of readers.
It definitely makes me want to go back and read some of my old favorites and see if I can find those hidden gems that I missed the first time around. It's like they're throwing a grenade into your, comfortable little world of literary assumptions.
Exactly. And I think those moments of surprise are so important because they remind us that there's always more to learn, even from the stories we think we know best. They shake us out of our complacency and force us to engage with the text on a deeper level.
Put it. So if you're looking for a show that will challenge you, make you think, and maybe even change the way you see your favorite books, then you should definitely check out Large Lit Theory.
Absolutely. It's one of those shows that sticks with you, and who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to pick up a book and go on your own literary adventure. It's a pretty exciting time to be a bookworm.
That's what we like to hear. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Large Lit Theory. Until next time, happy reading, everyone.